My name is Todd Holman. I'm the Mississippi Headwaters Program Director for the Nature Conservancy here in this Minnesota North and South Dakota chapter. I'm also, in relation to this project, I am the Camp Ripley Sentinel Landscape Coordinator. And so I'm a contract coordinator for the Sentinel Landscape program with Camp Ripley as the installation hub. And I've been working with the Camp Ripley program. The Army Compatible Use Buffer program was the beginning in 2004, and in 2016 we became federally designated as Camp Ripley Sentinel Landscape, which made us part of a federal or a national Sentinel Landscape program. And really, the gist of what that program means, what's it mean to be in a partnership, a federal partnership. It's a partnership between three federal entities, so the Department of Defense, the Department of Interior, and the U.S. Department of Ag. Those three federal agencies have all combined to support the National Sentinel Landscape Program, which really focuses on maintaining and sustaining the military mission and the training capabilities of installations on a national scale. So Camp Ripley happens to be one of 7 Sentinel landscapes federally designated. And then we work with state agency partners like the Board of Water and Soil Resources, the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Military Affairs, all of the agencies that you would think about that are involved with natural resources and cultural resources. In the process of becoming a state partnership with federal partnership in the Sentinel landscape context, we had to develop a strategic plan. How are we all going to work together and develop goals and activities that we all can share and mutually benefit from, the strength of each other's to keep working lands working. Our mantra has always been to keep farms and to keep forests. And so we've worked to develop programs to support the sustainability of that for private landowners. So it's really been a private landowner focused program, using tools like conservation easements, seeking funding like NRCS through the Natural Resource Conservation Service to bring in practices dollars to help agricultural producers. People do forestry on their land. So we've really been trying to enable private land implementation of practices and sometimes protection in the form of conservation easements over the period, the 15, almost 16-year running of the program. So that's kind of a long description of what the Sentinel Landscape Program is. One of those strategies that links to this particular project is a cultural resource protection strategy. And so it's easy to think about natural resource protection. We have a lot of data, a lot of maps, a lot of agencies that focus on it, DNR, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and so forth, that focus on natural resource protection. One of the pieces that we found missing was a compilation of the cultural resource data sets. We didn't have really good maps. We didn't have good pieces of information all in one place within the geography of the Sentinel landscape for Camp Ripley. And the Sentinel landscape for Camp Ripley is roughly about a 10-mile radius around Camp Ripley, so 805,000 acres, so a pretty large footprint in central Minnesota with amazingly robust cultural resource history, the confluence of many rivers, the landforms that were here, even starting with the Paleo-Indians. The geography and the geology of this area kind of led human occupation and human footprint here long before European and recorded history. And so recognizing that, it seemed important to develop a cultural resource strategy. And here we are. We were successful as a partnership working with Sylan Township. Sylan Township has had a huge passion for cultural resource and shining a light on the cultural resource history of this region. And they were willing to apply for a Minnesota Historical Society Cultural Heritage Grant. So we have helped them all along the way to develop the kind of the underpinning for writing the grant and supporting the meetings and the partnership that led to ultimately contracting with Nienow Cultural Consultants to pull this project together and make a document that has spatial qualities, a map, GIS map that we can all see, and a report that identifies kind of the significance of all of the cultural history in this area, so that as a Sentinel Landscape partnership, we can use that to help bring new partners to the conversation and maybe new projects and maybe new additional funds to help bring more awareness and maybe even bring more knowledge to the body of the cultural resources that exist here.
My name is Jeremy Nienow. I am a principal investigator and archaeologist who's been working here in Minnesota since about 2000. And currently I run a archaeology company here in the Twin Cities called Nienow Cultural Consultants. We've been around for 6 to 7 years now. And really what's interesting about our company is that it really is a group of sub-consultants. I don't have any employees that work for me. When I have the ability to tackle larger work, I pull in other members of the archaeological community that have specialties, and then together, collectively, we go after these projects. So this project, this bubble of land that surrounds Camp Ripley is what they like to call a sentinel landscape that goes around it. And it's hundreds of thousands of acres in size. And it includes some major metropolitan areas like Brainerd, but it also includes lots of open farm, woodlands, wetlands, lots of different waterways are all in this bubble. So they want to pursue protection of those as much as possible, a buffer zone between them and development. But in order to get through that process, the first step for them is to understand what's already there. This is actually pretty common in archaeology. Most times when I'm working with a developer, one of the first times that I get involved as an archaeologist, they'll ask me, well, what do we already know? What do we already know about this project area? So we think of that as a literature review, an assessment of what's already present. Are there known archaeological sites that people, oh yeah, we did some work back in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, and here's that work. Oh yes, there's been some development that's come through, some new expansion infrastructure for highways and roads, bridges, and there was some archaeology done with that by the DOT and others. Here's what we know about that. Here's some information about National Historic registered sites that are in the area. Here's some information about architectural properties. And then here are stories and long-held traditions and ideas about, we know that that was an area maybe of cultural significance to Native Americans, or we know that this was an important, interesting area historically, but no one's ever gone and looked at it. Pulling together all of that data is really what this project is all about. I think of this project really as a massive opportunity not to collect data so much about the project area, but help the public understand the rich diversity of that data and what the next steps could be for them for exploring their own history and the history of others. When they put out that RFP, I really thought, how can we go about accomplishing this work? Myself and a few of the people on the team, we already have a lot of experience here in Minnesota. I've been working in Minnesota for more than 20 years myself. I started doing archaeology back in 1993, so I knew I could do a certain portion of the work, but I couldn't do all the work. So I went out and got a variety of different individuals at different parts of their career, not only that are archaeologists, but also that are historians and people that have tribal interest and involvement so that we can incorporate as many diverse voices as possible. So for the team itself, it's myself as the project manager, and then Fred Sutherland and Jeremy Jackson as our primary data collectors in this. Fred Sutherland is an industrial archaeologist, an historical archaeologist. Jeremy Jackson is a historian that is from the area up there and has incredibly involved and active, and he does lots of work that overlaps between history and archaeology, working with Hamlin and others. And then Laura Koski is our GIS. She's also a faunal expert, but she's primarily in this role. Another person that's involved with the project, her name is Anastasia Wolhoff, and she's actually working on the project mostly remotely because she's doing interesting archaeology in the American Southwest right now. She's an enrolled tribal member of a Native American group up in northern Wisconsin. She's been working with me for the last several years on tribal issues. She's been doing Native American monitoring for archaeological projects. So I immediately reached out to her to say, hey, would you be interested in this project? And she is. So she's doing our consultation with traditional Native American populations through something called THPOs, which are Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. She's reaching out to them. She's talking with them, conversing with them, seeing what kind of data they'd be comfortable giving us in this process. And we're really hopeful that we will get as many different pockets of information as possible from past researchers, from present researchers, from tribal community, and put it all together into one meaningful data set for the public.
My name is Laura Koski, and Generally, I'm an archaeologist and GIS specialist. For the specific project, I will be the GIS technician and kind of like the technical coordinator for all of the data that comes in and creating the geodatabase for the Greater Sentinel Landscape.
Oh, hello. My name is Fred Sutherland, and my expertise and background, if we want to call it that, is in industrial heritage and archaeology.
My name is Jeremy S. Jackson. I use S because there's other Jeremy Jacksons. I've always had a really strong interest in historical research and archaeology.
So we're in the middle of the methodology stage of designing how we plan to gather the data. So we're at the stage of exactly what data do we want to gather, and then how do we go about gathering the data, and what about that information do we need to know?
Methodology is going to matter a lot. How we frame our questions and how we go about answering them is really a great challenge to look at starting out, because if we don't ask those questions now, we're definitely going to be asking those questions later, and it's probably going to be in a situation we don't want to be in. So if we can avoid that, if we can head that off by thinking broadly and conceptually about what's going to matter, not just us, but to the people we want to be engaging with. In this case, Sylan Township, Camp Ripley, and the stakeholders associated with those groups. We want to be able to answer questions for them and tell meaningful things with the data we collect. We've gone now from being like too specific to too broad. Because landscape is like, okay, it's whatever could be in view, but they also have cultural viewshed. So it's like,
So we're trying to get down to the broad, and then further specifying, okay, so we know the kinds of data we want to record. What about those kinds of data is the client interested in? What's important for understanding the Sentinel landscape on the whole?
I think the biggest thing is there's just a mountain of material that we could review and include, and we got to figure out what do we trim off of this project.
And so to do that, first we're designing those categories, and then beyond that, we start with the Office of State Archaeologist and the State Historic Preservation Office, because they already have files upon files upon files of records of archaeological sites and architectural properties. And these could be your standard site or to the level of National Register listed, which gives it an extra level of protection and importance. And then beyond that, things that have not yet been formally recorded with those two offices. And that's what Fred and Jeremy Jackson are doing, is they're going to county, city, town level historic societies or history centers and collecting what they know on the local level.
This is probably Rice Lake and Brainerd.
so this is too far south?
No. All of this is in the project area.
So it's really going to be doing a lot of the hands-on sifting through paper files and picking out a sheet of paper going, yep, that's important, yep, that's not, and then trying to fit this into the broader kind of standardized geodatabase we have to put it into.
I'm from Brainerd originally, so I'm from central Minnesota, which falls within the Sentinel Landscape that we're studying. And so mid-Minnesota is really the area of Minnesota that I spent a lot of time studying and understanding the history. I'm one of the primary Brainerd historians.
Jeremy Jackson, that's his home turf. Like, he grew up there, he has family roots there, he knows that landscape really well. So he and I will be going out there like bloodhounds, just sniffing out data in all the places we know where it lurks that maybe somebody who wasn't familiar with the region, could find it.
It's like pedestrian survey where you just go out and you look for features. You go look at a structure, but it's really not invasive. So it's really just confirming the existence of either extant features or buildings that are historical structures. Let me get this one. There may be a fur training post or something working.
So with this, for instance, one example with the architectural category to consider, starting with the State Historic Preservation Office and whatever else we can find locally, that will encompass basically all standing structures in the 4-county connected area of the Sentinel Landscape, which is going to be a lot. And that will end up being likely a singular shapefile within the geodatabase, and that just means either it's a vector of polygons I draw or points I just click onto the map and say there's a point there, that's a house or something like that. And then within that file, there's a deeper attribute table. And so you, in theory, the final purpose of this is that the user can then click on that dot, and then a pop-up window pops up, or a table on the side, And then that will give you everything you need to know about that dot. That's important, at least for the purposes of the landscape. And so in the case of architecture, we might say, here's the date we knew it was built, if we know it is. The date, maybe we know there's significant changes to it. Maybe we can add that to the date. If it has names, we'll include those names. Or if we know of specific owners, we'll include the owners. And they might be significant people, so those could be included. On top of that, we would include function. So maybe it was a post office or a house or a store, industrial center of some sorts. We would specify that. If it is on the National Register, we would say it's listed. If it's maybe eligible, we'd make sure we know that people know it's eligible. Or maybe it's already been assessed and it's found not to be that significant, we'd say not eligible. That's already determined. And if none of that's happened, we'll say unassessed. So all of that will pop up for the user, and they'll know everything significant about that one spot, and they can decide, depending on their development, their plans, or if it's just research, they can use that information to make their decisions from there.
The important thing about doing it in GIS is that then it can go to lots of different groups of people, and you can, in a sense, buffer the amount of data you're showing. Yes, we can get pinpoint, small sub-meter accuracy on lots of locations, but for things that are much more sensitive, like traditional cultural properties for Native American peoples, we don't want to tell people exactly where that's at. We want to keep that sacred and separate in a lot of ways. So we're going to be doing that data probably at a 1 mile buffer zone, a quarter section of buffer zone.
I started because Camp Ripley is at the center of this whole area, and it's somewhat of interest to Camp Ripley. They already have their own cultural geodatabase within the camp, so I asked if I could get examples of what they've been doing so we could best make it for the surrounding geodatabase that we're building, because we're not doing anything within the camp, that they could then just quickly, easily merge all of our data into their data instead of having to rework things and redo coordinate systems and redo how data is organized. It'd already be set up for that, and they could easily merge it together. So that was stage 1, and then stage 2 is for things that they weren't already considering, or things that they may not be of direct interest to Camp Ripley, but they might be to National Guard or Sylan Township. Then going out and seeing what are other people doing in their systems like this, so we can think of things that maybe wouldn't have occurred to us right off the bat, but others have already thought about this at depth. So we can learn from those who've already gone through this. And that's part of this methodology stage 2, is trying to incorporate previously gained wisdom into the wisdom we're trying to create for ourselves. And so far, that's working out very well.
Making sure our language matches the language of their own systems right now, so that their spreadsheets and databases can talk to ours, and that somebody looking across them will understand, oh yeah, this is here, this is meaningful. We want to do meaningful things.
Part of this project is interviewing landowners or other historians, people that work at the historical societies. So really networking with individuals to make sure we're I guess, broadly covering as much as we can the history of this region.
How do you turn that into meaningful data is something that's I'm definitely wrestling with. And I'm afraid I'm going to find sites that don't neatly fit into one of our predefined buckets or another. It's going to be both and, neither nor kind of situation. And then we're going to have to get creative. And like that's both exciting and terrifying. It's a great aha moment of discovery. And I feel like when you're in an area that's been underrepresented and underdocumented in the current historic record, we're going to encounter that.
There's been interest in this project area, but it has been sporadic and it has been targeted. No one's ever looked at the entire area as a whole. So that's a huge benefit of this project. And I know that that's going to generate a wonderful series of surprises.
We will, I think, discover challenges. We'll discover probably significant cultural resources that we may not know what to do with, in terms of, is our partnership able to work on funding for protecting? How do we work with the private landowner? Those are things that are going to be new to us.
The project is really a passion because this really is my backyard in terms of where I grew up, and I have so many family connections to all the counties in this project area. For me, it's to be able to apply everything I've studied and work on that within this project. I think that's going to be very rewarding.
That's actually the part that excites me the most, is able to tell these bigger stories to a wider audience that haven't been told before. So if we get to do that again with Sentinel, I am 100% stoked for that.